Hello, my name is Jerry Hahn. We're going to be together for the next hour or so. You know, I've been working with Volkswagens for the last 15 years. I've personally assembled hundreds of Volkswagen engines, and the experience I've learned, sometimes the hard way, I'm going to share with all of you. I'm delighted you've purchased this videotape because for the first time, you're going to see and hear how to properly build this engine. I want you to view this tape all the way through in one sitting so you can get the full effect of assembly. Also, you'll have a chance to start your notebook. I want you to take notes. You know, no matter where you live, there will be a dealer or someone who works on Volkswagens very near to you. Some of them are very good, and some not so good. This engine is a very simple mechanism, and a problem arises when someone does one or two of these, or even a dozen of these engines, then declares himself a Volkswagen expert, because there's a whole big mountain of Volkswagen myths and scare stories about this engine, and the parts that are used. Please forget most of what you've heard about building this engine. Listen to me and watch what we do. I can see you now, with your jack in one hand and a couple of jack stands in the other, as you approach your bug there in the driveway. And when you finally get the engine out there in the driveway, you're now wondering where to go. Well, you have to get the shroud off the engine, of course, and keep the parts in some kind of order so you won't lose that whatchamacallit or whatever. And when you get all the shroud off the engine and all you have left is the basic long block, then this is where we begin our tape. Well, I'm just about ready to go change clothes and head for the shop, but before I do, I must get some of the legals out of the way. The term Volkswagen, or VW, used in connection with this tape are for descriptive and application purposes only, and have no connection with Volkswagen of America or any of their dealers, with me, or this tape. Also, this tape is copyrighted. Please don't copy it. For the money you paid, you're getting thousands of dollars worth of advice and experience from me. Tell your friends to buy the tape. It's worth it. Well, enough of this. Let's go to the shop. That's the engine you saw in the driveway. We're going to be working on that particular engine just a little bit later, but first I want to talk about some of the engine parts and some of the components and some of the machining that you might have to have done once you get your engine apart. Let me put this cigar down for right now. I've laid out here on the table a few camshafts, crankshafts, rods, a couple of cases, and I'm going to talk about what to look for and what kind of machining you might want to have done once you have your engine apart. By the way, you're going to have to locate or find somewhere near you that Volkswagen machine shop that I was talking to you a little bit earlier. Someone's going to have to know how to do these things we talk about, so you might pick up the phone book and try to locate someone who will do some of the things we're going to talk about. Let's start with the case. I have a couple of cases here on the table. This case right here hasn't had any kind of machining done to it yet, and I think that's the best way we can begin by showing you what to look for when you get the case apart, and all you have on the table is your empty case. Of course, the flywheel is in front here, and the first thing I'd like to talk about are cracks. Cracks that can naturally or unnaturally occur in the block itself. The block's made of magnesium. It's hard, it's tough, it's strong, and it's very light. But sometimes a crack will occur at 2, maybe 3 spots on the cases, although I've seen cracks all over the case, so go over it very carefully. 9 times out of 10, all cracks will occur right about here, and if the camera will come in a little bit closer, and if you can imagine the stud, the engine stud, the head studs, there are 16 of them, 8 on each side. These are the things that hold the pistons and liners and the heads on. This stud right here on number 3, the one right here that I have my hand on, ends right there inside the case. It goes inside the case and ends right there. Well, at that point, right there, cracks begin to show up when the engine overheats, or if there's undue stress at that point. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But the crack will look like a piece of hair stuck on there. And if you wipe it off real good, clean it up, sometimes apply just a little bit of heat, the oil you'll see seep out. And as you're driving the car, or it's idling, and it's up to operating temperature, a lot of times oil will just continually seep out there. And eventually, the crack will travel all the way down to the bottom. There's a plug down here in the corner, and I've seen it where these plugs actually blow out. But for now, when you take your flywheel off, always check in this area here for cracks. Very often the flywheel seal, which is in here, is blamed for all the leaks that occur, but 9 times out of 10 it's not the seal. A crack is developed here. Okay, the other places you can look for cracks are the oil tower area, the oil sender area, and over on the other side of the case, this is piston number 1 right here. Number 1, number 2, over here's number 3, this is number 4. This top stud on piston number 1, very often a crack will occur there and run up the side of the case there. Cracks usually occur because the engine's overheated. This case is a marvel in machining. These two case halves right here and over here, when at the factory, these two case halves were machined straight down so that when you put it together, they fit perfectly together. There wasn't a gap anywhere. They just, both case halves, both of these smooth surfaces, straight together. Okay, if the engine overheats, if it gets hot, the engine can warp. Let me explain this. If you've ever taken a piece of paper, plain piece of paper, hold it in your hand, take a match, lighted match, and hold it under the piece of paper. And just before the paper catches fire, you take the match away and look at the piece of paper. You'll see the paper all scrumbled up, all crinkled up. The paper has warped. Just before it caught fire, it moved a little bit. Well, this doesn't catch fire, but if this engine gets hot, these perfectly machined case halves that fit together in the middle, down the center here where it's the hottest, what happens is that, if you'll come up to my hands here, I'll show you what can happen. What happens is that they separate just a little bit like that. How much? Oh, the thickness of a piece of paper, 20 thousandths, 10 thousandths. And then you put the engine back together and you didn't check it for warpage, and you have no oil pressure and the thing heats up, all your money wasted. So you must check this case for warpage. How? Simple, real simple. Get the case clean, take it apart, put it back together again. Whap. Get your nuts that you had before, tighten up these 6 main bolts to 25 foot-pounds, 22 foot-pounds. Tighten them up, nothing in the case. Get yourself a flashlight and look right down the center. Look right down the center, hold the flashlight on the other side of the case. Let me see if I can hold it up here. See where my hand is inside there wiggling around? Hold the flashlight on this side and hold it up and down on the journals and look on the other side. And if you can see light through any of the machine surfaces, if you can see light in there where there's not supposed to be light, where it's supposed to be touching together, when it's torqued down, if you can see light, it might be warped. Have someone look at it and confirm your suspicions. If it's warped, get another case. You see this line going up and down here? Well, that line is a tracing of a bearing, and I'm going to pull open a set of bearings here and just show you the split bearings. If you'll come in a little bit closer, we can see the bearing. You see the trail around the middle of the bearing here. Well, that corresponds with the trail that's there because this bearing fits in right here. Now, this bearing a brand new set of them right here. This is a nice round bearing. And what has happened over 40,000 or maybe 80, 100,000 miles, what has happened is that this bearing has been pounded back and forth because this is a horizontally opposed engine. And if you did, believe me, if you did this for about 5 minutes real hard, like the engine's doing, your shoulders would be sore in the morning. Well, they get sore too, but what happens is they become egg-shaped. The round hole, remember this is this half and then the other half and then this fits together and you have a round hole here. You're supposed to have one. And the pounding that occurs here and on the other side makes the original round hole egg-shaped. So when you go to put a new bearing in here, without what we call line boring the case, we can run into real problems with the crank not turning properly or not turning at all, because the egg-shaped hole and the new round bearing, it pinches and it won't work. So what is generally done when you can feel a ridge on this journal and this journal up here, when you can feel that kind of ridge, generally you should ask someone, either by mail order through the magazines or someone local, send the case to them and ask them to properly line bore the case. And what they do is they bore the case out, or either 20 thousandths, 40 thousandths, or whatever. They bore the case larger than what it was originally, and they give you a bearing that's bigger on the outside so that it will fit in the case and fit the new bore. I have a case right here that has been line bored, and if you look at the camera, could come in here a little bit closer and look here. This is nice and shiny and very, very smooth. The oversized bearing that we have right here will now fit in here nice and tight and be round, just like the hole is round, just like it was originally. So that's something you should look for, line boring. It takes the case and makes the hole larger. Then you fit a larger bearing, outside diameter, into that bore. If you do have it line bored, you're going to have to tell whoever does it the size of your crankshaft. Now when I say the size of your crankshaft, I mean, is the journal standard size? Is it ground 10 thousandths under, 20 thousandths under, or 30 thousandths, whatever? Is the crankshaft been reground? Is it smaller? You're going to have to tell them your crank size so they know to give you the proper bearings for their bore. Now let's talk about case saving or inserting. This is not a Healy coil. A Healy coil is a coil. This is a piece of steel that's been tapped on the dyed on the outside and tapped on the inside. The inside, the stud fits into it. The outside is threaded like this, so that when we pull out all these studs, we drill and we tap and we run this case saver into the case. This case saver is run right into the case, and then we put our stud back in here like this. Now this case saver is a lot bigger than this original stud. It has much bigger, deeper, fatter threads than the original, and it's much stronger. When you put these case savers in this case, the case then becomes much stronger than if you just have this particular stud in there. Let's talk about torque, I suppose. One of the reasons why the studs pull out of the case or relieve themselves is because, because people over-torque them. They exceed the torque that the factory recommends. The other reason, of course, is heat. But very often I will find folks who feel that, well, the book says 23 foot-pounds of torque. Well, if 23 is good, 33 must be much better. Not true. This is an air-cooled engine. This isn't water-cooled, this is an air-cooled engine. This case, at operating temperature, sits at around 220 degrees. The heads, the cylinder heads out here, sit at about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So the engine runs very, very hot. Now, the engine was made out of aluminum and magnesium and these steel studs, and if you could see it under time-lapse photography, which I'm not going to do to show you on this tape, but if you could see it, This engine would be like an accordion. When it gets hot, it goes like this. When it gets cold, it goes like this. When you torque the heads on the case, when you torque them down to 23 foot-pounds, 25 foot-pounds, the factory calls for 22 to 23, 24. When you torque it down to that, cold, and then you go out and you drive the engine and get the engine up to operating temperature, that torque becomes 55 pounds. So you can see what happens if you arbitrarily increase your torque on the head studs out here or anywhere else. When the engine gets up to operating temperature, that torque is going to be proportionately higher. And when you do that kind of stuff, that's when damage can occur, because this is, well, it's soft. Aluminum is softer than steel and iron. And when you put an iron liner in between an aluminum head and a magnesium case and you exceed the torque, something's going to give. The studs won't give anymore because you've case saved. What's going to give? You're going to wear ridges into around the barrels here, and you're going to wear ridges in the head, and you're going to have loose heads. So please don't exceed torque. Let me bring the blackboard up here. I hope it doesn't glare too much on the camera. And we're going to talk about two things on the blackboard of which you're going to take notes on. Okay? We're talking from 1960 through 1967. I didn't go 1966 for a very, very good reason. And if you come in a little bit closer here on the blackboard, then you'll be able to take notes and see what I'm talking about. Okay, in 1960 through here, let's see, let's draw an arrow right here. We're going to say 6 volt. 1967 on was 12 volt. That's the voltage system, because we'll refer to voltages a little bit later. So know that from 1960 through 67, if you have that car, you basically have a 6 volt automobile, and later on you have a 12 volt car. Okay? Now, the second thing I want to talk about is torque. Okay? In all these years, there's only a couple of torques you have to keep in mind. All the small 8mm nuts and bolts that are around the engine, all the 8mm get basically torqued to 14 pounds. Okay? The main case bolts, the 6 main case bolts, get torqued to, again, 23 to 25 foot-pounds. Okay? The heads, if you have a 10mm stud in it, the stud right here, on my teeth, the stud, if this is 10mm on your engine, it also gets torqued down to the 23 to 25 foot-pounds. If you have head studs that are 8mm, 8mm, if the camera will come in here, 8mm, here you can see the difference. This particular stud right here is 8mm. It's smaller than the 10mm. Let's lay it right alongside of it. If your head studs are 8mm, very important now, and that only occurs, by the way, up here in 1970, perhaps 71, okay? That only occurs up there, the 8mm head studs. The 8mm head studs get torqued to 18 pounds. No more. 18 pounds. And when you put them, you can't see it? Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. That's all right. When you put the studs in the case on one of these 8mm head studs, when you put the stud in the case, it goes in hand tight too. You don't wrench tight it into the case. You don't want torque fighting torque. If you exceed 18 foot-pounds, or if you tighten these 8mm head studs in the case too much, your heads are going to come loose. Keep that in mind. Okay, so we have 14 foot-pounds for the 8mm nuts and bolts around the case. We're not talking about this. And 23 to 25 foot-pounds for just about everything else. All right, here we have a 40 horse or 1200 rod, 1960 through 1965, okay? This one right here. This is what's called a 1500 rod. This was used 1966 through about 1968 or 9. This is the 1600 rod, and it was used from about 68, 69 to present, or up to a couple of years ago when they stopped making this thing. Okay, now what's the difference between these rods, okay? Well, these two rods here, the 1500 and the 1600, if you can come into these here so I can explain these both have the same hole size or pin size. This right here is where the pin goes through on the piston. This is the piston end right here. The 40 horse rod, the earlier one, has a much smaller hole. Okay? Now the other main difference between these rods is that this rod right here, the 1600 rod, is a bolt and nut combination. Oops. Bolt and nut combination. There's a bolt in the cap that goes into the bottom, and then a nut is put on the bottom, and it's torqued up. This rod gets torqued to 22 to 25 foot-pounds. Now, what you can see, perhaps on the inside here, where this bolt comes through, there's a spline. Perhaps you can't see it, but you look at your rods. There's a spline or serrated portion that, when this rod is put together, fits tightly in there, so that now the cap and the bottom, the top and the bottom, fit nice and tight and nice and square with each other. This rod, if you have it, bolt and nut, gets torqued 22 to 25 foot-pounds. Okay? Put him aside, go to the early rods. Okay? What we have is the 1500 rod and the 40 horse rod. The pin sizes are different. Smaller pin size here, larger pin size here. This pin size is the same as the 1600. Okay, the major difference between these two rods and that one down there is that this one is just bolt. There's no bolt and nut. So the bolt comes from the bottom, screw it out here, and there's nothing up in here, so that you put the bolt through the bottom and it screws into the top or the cap of the rod. Okay? Now what happens is that this rod is called a non-self-aligning rod. The cap can rock back and forth this way, it can move back and forth this way. So when you tighten these down and you torque these down, if you just go ahead and put them on there and torque them down, you could be off center. This cap could be this way, and the bearing that would be fitting in there would seize up on it and would seem awful tight, and you wouldn't know what to do. So what you have to do is you have to align these rods when you put them on. You have to make sure that when you put them on that you don't have too much this way or too much this way. You have to kind of pull on them as you're torquing them down, move them around, and then tighten them down, because these rods must be absolutely free. They should fall with their own weight all the way around the crank when you put it on. What if you have one that you pull and you torque it and it doesn't seem to want to turn? Well, maybe it's out of round. Maybe you shouldn't use it again. If it was burned or the old bearing was burned, maybe you shouldn't use this rod over again. You might want to replace it. The other way is you put this rod on the crankshaft and you torque it to maybe 4, 5, 6 pounds. Just tighten it down, try to turn it, and then get your hammer and try to look at it and try to determine where it might be cocked down this way or turned over on this side, and tap it. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes it just doesn't want to go there. There's a tight spot right there. You take your hammer and you tap it here, and it loosens up. Then you retorque it all the way down, and it might work. But you might have to tap it here, you might have to tap it here, there, here, there, here, there, work it back and forth until you finally get the rod absolutely swinging free on the crankshaft. If you try all that and it still doesn't work, replace the rod. When you have a bolt-only rod, the torque is 36 foot-pounds. Bolt and nut rod, the torque is 22 to 25 foot-pounds. I keep saying 22 to 25. You can, you're not going to do too much damage if you're within 2 or 3 foot-pounds difference there. It's this business of increasing 10, 20 foot-pounds in this air-cooled engine that just doesn't work. Crankshafts, here they are. Come on in here and we'll take a look, and I'll just basically show you that this one has a nice big fat journal here, and this one over here is kind of skinnier. Okay, this is a 1200. This is a 1200 crankshaft, our 40-horse crankshaft. This one right here will work in everything from 1966 on. This particular crankshaft is a 1600 cross drill crankshaft. If you look down in here, I don't know if we can get in close enough, but the oil journals, one goes this way and the other one goes up the other way. One goes this way and one goes that way. Some 1500 cranks have a straight hole that go through the center. Okay, doesn't matter because this is a 69 millimeter stroke crankshaft. This is a 64 millimeter stroke crankshaft. Main thing to look at from the bottom here, and this we need the camera to come in a little bit closer on. Right here on the bottom at the base, we're going to get to voltages. Good, hold it right there. This crankshaft right here that we're looking at is our 1600 crank. Now, maybe if I get the screwdriver I can point at it a little bit closer. You see from the end here all the way up to this point right here, right there. Now if you'll go over to the other crankshaft and look here, we have from the end of the crankshaft to right there. Now if you can come back just a little bit, and so we can see both crankshafts side by side, up a little bit closer in. I'll try to hold these cranks right next to each other so we can see. Okay? This is our 1600 crank, this is our 40-horse crank. We call this a 12-volt crankshaft. We call this a 6-volt crankshaft. Why do we call it that? Because this crankshaft fits into a 12-volt flywheel. This crankshaft here will not fit into a 12-volt flywheel. All right, this crankshaft right here and this one right here, both of them, will both fit into a 6-volt flywheel. Now, you might have to rewind that to get that one straight again. And why do we say that? Because this crankshaft here, the 1600, has an O-ring seal inside the flywheel. It has an O-ring seal that rests on this area right here. This one does not, and you must use a paper or a metal shim out there to help it from leaking. Generally, you should not use this crankshaft on a 6-volt flywheel. You should not use it because it's not as strong as it was this way, and it was intended. And a lot of people run into a lot of different problems with this flywheel and crankshaft business. A 6-volt crankshaft, flywheel rather, basically does not have an O-ring on the inside of the flywheel, and a 12-volt does. Okay, let's talk a little bit about heads and head condition. You know the different types here. The heads work in the engine very, very hard. They run at terrifically high temperatures, 300, 350 degrees. And the guides and the valves, they work in much higher temperatures, much higher than any water-cooled engine ever had to work in. And my feeling is that if you have, well, more than 40,000 miles, 50, 60, and you've religiously adjusted your valves every 2,000 miles or so, change the oil, that you really should have a valve job done on the head. And a valve job gets into a lot of there's a lot of misunderstanding here about valve jobs. It doesn't work grinding and putting back the old exhaust valves. The valves drop, they break in half, they slam into the inside of the engine and destroy the engine. Don't reuse the exhaust valves. Replace all the exhaust valves whenever a valve job is done. Don't regrind the exhaust valves. That doesn't work generally. And I've found this out, and so have many, many other people have come to realize this over the years. Always replace the exhaust valves during a valve job. Replace the guides. Don't knurl the guides, don't resize them. Replace the guides with silicon bronze guides. Replace all of them, intakes and exhaust. Through experience, this is the way to do it. Replace all the guides. You can reuse the intake valves. You can regrind those and reuse those. That's perfectly fine. They don't work under the hot temperature that the exhaust valve does. Make sure that someone knows how to work on this head before you entrust this head to them. Make sure they know that that the valve seat should be properly cut, 3-angle cut generally, and that they assure you that the seat and the valve seat themselves. Now, I'm old-fashioned, and probably I'll be criticized for saying this, but I'm going to say it, and I do it. I do it on every head I've done, and I've literally done thousands of heads, thousands and thousands of heads. I always lap my valves in. Now, this involves bluing the seat, putting a little lapping compound on it, lapping the valve in. It takes a lot of extra time and a lot of extra care, but when I get done, I know that the valve and the seat have truly mated with one another, seated each other, and that they're going to work from the moment it gets out of the shop. I do that, and a lot of garages don't do it anymore. A lot of shops don't do it anymore. They say, well, my equipment is so good that I don't need to do that. Our equipment's good, but once in a while I do find that for some reason the seat is not seating itself on one side or the other, so I redo it and lap the valves in. The springs, you should have someone look at them or test them. You might not always have to have them tested, but most places that do heads do test them. Perhaps shim them up with a little insert underneath the spring and get the head nice and clean back to you. Now, when you do have a valve job done on your head, make sure that it's all cleaned very nicely, that it's all cleaned, and that one other thing has been checked, and that's, I'm looking for a head here that hasn't had it so that I can show you. Ah, yes, this head I don't believe was, and I don't think you'll be able to see it, but you'll be able to see this at home. You look at the inside of the head where the barrel and the liner, the piston and the liner, the barrel of course goes in here and the piston goes inside that. But look around the edge. If you can see any lines or marks where the barrel has been pressing into the head, look at it and determine whether that's not going to be acceptable, because there's no gasket between the barrel and the head. There's no gasket used in there. It's steel against aluminum, and it has to be flat. It has to be parallel. What we do, and if you look at this, I'll hold it aside here. It probably looks very, very shiny to you. This head has been fly cut, and it takes 8 to 10 thousandths of aluminum away. But when we get done fly cutting, this surface is absolutely flat. When you put the barrel on here, it's going to mate and seat. There's no problem with that. Some people ask me, what about lapping in the barrel with the liner? Fine, if you have the time, go ahead and do it. No one says you can't. A word about lapping compound, by the way. You better get it all out. You better wash it off very, very carefully. When you take apart your pistons and liners, a brand new set or your old set, and you lap them in there, make sure all that lapping compound, and when you lap in valves or whatever, make sure it's completely washed away and you got all of it out of there, because that's some pretty harsh stuff. I'm going to go over here, take the engine apart, and I'm going to lay everything out, and then I'll join you in a minute or so, and we'll start assembling the engine. Okay, so why don't we go over. Okay, I've taken the engine apart. I've machined the case and the heads and checked the crankshaft. We've checked everything out, and I've laid all the parts for assembly here on the table. Let's get to assembling the engine now. We're going to assemble a a single port engine, a 1967-68 engine. We're going to be using a 12-volt neck, 1600 cross drill crankshaft. We're going to put the rods on and the gears right away. When you put the rods on, hold the crankshaft or lay it on the table in such a way that it would be in the engine. That is, that here would be the flywheel, here would be the pulley. This would be number 3 piston, this would be number 1 piston, this would be number 4, and this would be number 2. Okay, so we got 2, 4, 1, 3. Okay, I'm going to put this in this holder right here in the same way that it would be in the engine if the engine were sitting here. We're going to first of all put the 2 bearings that are up here on the snout of the crankshaft on here, and we're going to put the gears on, the gears that drive the camshaft and the timing gear. First of all, let me get the big bearing that fits here, and if you'll notice, I don't know if you can come in a little bit closer, but I'll point to it with this and perhaps focus it in. There's a little hole there in the bearing, and that hole is the hole that the dowel pin in the case shaft fits into, which we'll get into a little bit later. Right now, let's put a little assembly lube on this bearing. The assembly lube I use and have used for years is something called Lubriplate. It's not too sticky, it's not too, it doesn't inhibit the movement of the bearing, but it's very slippery and it's very good for assembly. The hole, the dowel pin hole on the bearing goes toward the flywheel, goes down toward the flywheel, the hole in this bearing. Okay, I'm going to get my glove on because I placed the 2 gears in my little toaster oven. I have a little toaster oven over there, and I set it to about 300 degrees, and I put it in there for 5-10 minutes, and it gets the gear hot enough for me to just slip it right on there. You usually have to press it off. Don't press the bearing on. You should always heat the bearing on. It's the proper way to do it. Okay, here's our hot gear from the toaster oven, and it should go right on the crankshaft without too much difficulty. Butt it up right against the crankshaft. On that gear, if you'll look at it, look at the one you have, on one side it's straight, and on the other side it has like a little slant or a chamfer on the inside hole where it goes on the crankshaft. That chamfer goes toward the flywheel. Okay. Next we have the little spacer that goes in between the 2 gears, between the steel gear and the brass gear. That should slide right on there. And I'm now going to go back to the little toaster over, and we're going to put that brass gear on there right back. And our brass gear goes on just like that. Now they're hot and they're kind of loose right now, but in just a minute or so, those gears are going to be cooling down, and they're going to seize up on the crankshaft and be tight. After the cigar keeps getting in the way here, I better put it aside again. After we put the brass gear on, we have the locking ring. I have a special lock ring pliers here. Maybe you can see them there. That's you know, they're just square on the nose, and they fit into the lock ring, and they expand it open and like that, and then it fits right over the nose and holds those 2 gears in there. Kind of a special tool. You may not have this tool. You might want to have a machine shop put these gears on for you. Okay, we have the small bearing that fits in the nose just behind the pulley, and of course a little more Lubriplate, my assembly lube. A word about assembly lubes, by the way. There are a number of assembly lubes on the market. I use Lubriplate. You might not be able to find Lubriplate. You might find something in a parts store that's called assembly lube. A lot of it's very, very thick and gooey. Thin it out with a little oil. You don't want this assembly lube to be so thick and gooey that you can't feel the engine when you put it together. You want to be able to feel that engine, feel how loose it is. You don't want it all clouded up with thick, gooey grease and real sticky stuff. Don't use that real sticky stuff that comes in that can. If you know what I mean. Don't use that stuff. It's not very good for Volkswagen engines. Period. It's not very good because in my opinion, make them run a bit warm. But it's just too thick and gooey for this kind of assembly. If you don't have anything else, use oil. It'll work. Okay, let's put the rest of the nose on that crankshaft, and we'll get right into the rods. By the way, this slinger here, if you can come in and just zoom in, I don't need to know if you have to dolly in so much. There's a slinger on here, and it's kind of cupped. It's cupped, you know, like that. Make sure that the flare, cup or flare, is flared out. Don't put it on backwards so that the flare is in. If you do, the engine won't work too well. In fact, it will be tight when you put it together. There's a notch on all these connecting rods. You might be able to zoom on it from there, but there's this little notch here. 1,500 rods have them. Some 40-horse rods do not have them. They have numbers, so put the numbers up. But the notch goes up on all 4 of the rods, in whichever position we're going to do it in. Okay, I'm going to place the bearings with nothing behind the bearing surface, nothing behind there, dry. I'm going to be placing the bearings into the rod halves, like that, in the cap and the bottom part of the rod. Now you'll notice on connecting rods that each connecting rod has a little number stamped on it. Always put the number stamped is stamped for the cap up here, and for the bottom part of the rod. The numbers match together, they stay together, and don't put the number from this cap on another number with a rod down here. In other words, match the numbers up always when you put the rods on there. Therefore, that's for a very good reason, because the big end of the rod has been honed out to the mating side. This side and this side. There's 2 pieces here, and they have to mate together. So always put matching numbers on the rods together. Okay. We're again going to put a little bit of our assembly lube. We don't put a great deal on. We just put enough on there to cover the bearing. We don't want it to start dry when we start the engine up, because it takes a few seconds, 10-15 seconds maybe, not 15, but 5-10 seconds to get the oil pressure up to get it in here, and you don't want it to run dry. Match the numbers so that the numbers mate with each other, and the rods go on just like that. Then I use just a little bit of oil, regular old oil in an oil can, if we can get it to start squirting here. A little bit of oil on the threads, like that, before I put the nut on. Again, with the notch up and matching the numbers, we're going to be assembling that rod right there. A little bit of oil on the threads. You notice I'm not putting Loctite on, I'm putting oil on. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. You don't need Loctite when you put the rods on, when you put the rod nuts on. A little bit of oil will help our good friend Mr. Torque a lot more than Loctite will. Not that Loctite doesn't have its place. Loctite's very, very fabulous on many, many things, but for this engine here, for this Volkswagen, not really necessary. All right, let's find our numbers here. Number 827, 827 matched together, notch up. This is for piston number 4. Now let's see, we have number 3, number 1, number 4. This must be number 2. And so it is. And it slides on there. Hopefully. There we go. And again, a little bit of oil. And 2 rod nuts. The rod nut is a 14 millimeter nut, so we use a 14 millimeter the outside diameter is 14 millimeters, so we're going to be using a 14 millimeter socket. I'm using a clicker torque wrench here. We use them for speed. Doesn't make them any better than the beam type torque wrench back here. Yeah. This is a beam type torque wrench. In other words, when you torque it, this beam moves back and forth here and tells you how many pounds you have. But for right now, we're going to use this clicker type, and we're going to set our torque on these rods to 23 foot-pounds. That's what I use. 23 foot-pounds, and we go around and we torque down each particular rod. Now all 4 rods are torqued down, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to check each particular one to make sure that I did do it and that the torque is held. Each rod also should be nice and loose. Should fall on its own weight, as I mentioned before. Each one, we're going to check again. Our crankshaft is basically ready to go. We have all the rods with the notches up. If you'll come in a little bit closer here, Susie. Now that's far enough, and now come on down on the crankshaft. Okay, we have all the rods with the notches up in the proper sequence right here. Okay. The rods feel fine. This back and forth play, don't worry about it. You have 16 thousandths leeway to do that. In fact, when the oil comes out from under oil pressure in the engine, this crankshaft spinning, the oil that spins from the side play of these rods is the oil that goes into the pistons and liners and oils them. So don't be overly concerned about these if they click back and forth. Of course, if they're too loose, 20 thousandths or more, then you might want to do something about it. If they're too tight, that's something to worry about more than if they're 14, 16, 18 thousandths. Okay? If you smoke anything when you're working on these engines, you have to be real careful that the ashes don't drop into here, into the engine, cigarette pipe, especially these monsters here. Let's put the lifters and the cam bearings in the case. Oh, before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about lifters. Just a moment, I'll be right back. Okay, lifters, when you take the old lifters, this is a cam follower or a valve lifter. When you take this out of your engine, when you take it apart, you want to check this lifter. It's very easy to do it. Find anything that has a straight edge on it. Anything. Well, for that matter, even this bearing has a straight edge on it. And just, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but put something straight. It doesn't have to be this bearing. It can be anything. Put something straight on top there and hold it up to the light. If you can see the light underneath it, in other words, if the lifter's shaped like this, get the lifter reground or buy some new lifters and use them. Don't use one that's dished in, because these lifters, when they're brand new or reground, have a little mountain on top. That's because the cam doesn't hit the lifter straight on. It hits it a little bit on the side, and you want the lifter to turn as you're driving as you're driving down the road. The lifter is turning and oiling itself all the time, and it lasts a long time that way. If you put a worn lifter back in the car, it'll just keep wearing out faster than normal, and perhaps do damage to the cam, and also you'll be adjusting your valves a lot oftener. That I forgot to tell you that a little bit earlier. Okay, let's put the lifters. We have 8 lifters and the cam bearings in right now. I put a little bit of assembly lube on each one of the lifters again, just a little bit, and we pop them in. If you're going to be using your lifters over again, it's been said that you should put the same lifter back in the same hole that it came out of. These are brand new lifters. I believe these are German, although the same company I believe makes them in Brazil, and they're fine. They're a cast lifter, cast metal lifter instead of a machine cut lifter, and they've worked well for many years. Now, the cam bearings, there are 6 of them if you have a cam bearing case. 40-horse cases, earlier 40-horse cases didn't have cam bearings. I believe they started putting cam bearings in cases in 1965, I believe. But be that as it may, the cam bearings, of the 6 you have, one has a shoulder on it. The other ones don't. The one with the shoulder on it goes on the side of the case with the main stud sticking out, and it goes right here. It's the main thrust bearing for the camshaft. And the other camshaft bearings you really can't get lost because they're kind of, they're all size. The bigger one goes there, and then you have a couple of small ones, and they go over here. These just pop into place. Oh. I made a mistake there. And the cam bearings are now installed. Put a little bit of assembly lube on the cam bearings. You notice we don't put anything under the bearings. Never put anything under the bearings. Oil, sealant, or anything like that. Perfectly dry under the bearings. This particular case has cutouts down here. There's a cutout on each one of these 6 stud holes, and also over here on the stud, Susie, there's also a camphor there. Now, just hold it right there a second, and I'll show you what we use in there. Not all cases have this. 40-horse cases do not have it, and just because you get these in your gasket set, don't feel compelled that you have to use them. Very many times people will put these on and there's no place for them to go, and they just squeeze it out, and they just don't work. So unless your case is cut for these O-rings, don't use them. And they just slide down over like that. Okay, there's something I'd like to mention also, and that concerns dowel pins. Dowel pins are the little pins that keep the bearing in the proper place in the case. The dowel pins do not hold the bearing in place. They don't hold the bearing in place. They don't lock the bearing. They are there so that you locate the bearings over the oil holes. Very important. Many people think these little pins are the things that are going to hold the bearings in place. Not so. Without these little pins here, you might put the bearing in the case where the hole in the bearing is not at the oil hole in the case, and it won't get oily. So that's why they put it in here. There are 5 dowel pins. 5, not 6. There are 6 holes in the case. Some of them, most of them. And the newer cases have 5, but most of the old cases have 6 holes, but you only use 5 dowel pins. Very important. A lot of people pinch bearings because they put a dowel pin over on this side. If you can come down here, Susie. This is the side without the big studs. That's good enough. The only dowel pin you put on this side is the one with the split bearing, and that's in the center there. You don't put a dowel pin in this hole even though the hole's there. The other 4 dowel pins come to the other side of the engine. That's the side with the big stud sticking out. And you put your 4 dowel pins there. Very often people are very confused. They'll take the engine apart, and when they go to put it back together, they'll say, uh-oh, I lost a dowel pin. And they'll rush down to the dealer or parts store and they'll buy an extra dowel pin, stick it in here, put the crankshaft together, pinch the crankshaft, a ruined set of bearings. You have to go out and buy a new set of bearings. We're going to be dropping the crankshaft into the case half with the big stud sticking out. Little assembly lube on the bearing. bad manners to try to talk with that. Sorry. Again, the hole, if you can see this, show us this, Susie. There's a hole. That hole fits on this dowel pin down here. If you can come in real close for that, Susie. You see? That dowel pin there goes in that hole. And that dowel pin is there so that it will go in that hole, so that these oiling holes here are going to correspond with the oiling holes in the case, particularly over here. So we're going to put this on. That dowel pin, it's on the outside here toward the flywheel again. We're going to put it over here on the crankshaft, and it's going to be, again, that hole is going to be it's going to be pointing toward the flywheel. All the dowel pin holes, starting with the small one up here, goes toward the flywheel. Oh, there's a little trick you might do, because some people get confused. You can take practically anything, a little pencil or a pen, and where they come in close for this, Susie. Where this hole is, you can just come out here and scribe a pencil mark or something. That'll help you align this when you're putting it in the engine. Now we're going to put the two split bearings in the case. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about these split bearings here. The other ones are round, one-piece bearings. These are split bearings because, for the obvious reason, you can't slip these over the crankshaft. But this is also a little tool which, if I had known about a long time ago, would have saved me a lot of sets of bearings and pinched bearings, of the dowel pins pinching the bearings. This is a little tool, even though it's a bearing, that will allow you to check to see whether the crankshaft is truly in the dowel pin holes down here. And I'll show you how that works in a second. First of all, I'm going to put this bearing, the split main bearing, in the center of our case with the big studs sticking out. A little bit of our assembly lube again, like that. And I'm now going to drop the crankshaft, not literally, figuratively, into the case. Put it in just like that. And for now, just place it in there like that, and then begin to find the dowel pin holes for each particular bearing. You can hold up here with the rod, and you can look at your mark that you made, and you can just move the bearing around ever so slightly until you feel it click into place, and gently push down on it. The same thing over here on the other bearing. Just move them around until you can feel the dowel pin locate that hole. And we should get it right about there. And to make sure that our rods don't tie up on us. And then you do the very last one over here, and the whole thing is falling into place. And the way to check this at this point is to take the other half that's going in the other half of the case and just drop it down inside here on the crankshaft. If it rocks like that, can you see that, Susie? Come in a little closer. And if this rocks back and forth like this, then the crankshaft is not down in the dowel pin holes. So there's something wrong. At that point, just go back and check out what you're doing. So I did that on purpose so that we could see that. Now I'm going to try to locate our dowel pin holes the best we can and put them down inside. There we go. And you'll feel it fall into place. Now, if we take our bearing again and we drop it down on here, we should hear a clunk, and when we rock it, come on back in here, when we rock it back and forth, guess what? No rocking back and forth. It's secure. It's solid. That means we know, at that point, we know the crankshaft is now sitting in all the dowel pin holes properly. They're sitting down in there, and that when we go to put the other half on, we're not going to pinch any of the bearings and ruin a set of bearings. Remember now to take it out and to put it on the other side. But before we do that, we're going to put the camshaft in here, and we're going to put the distributor drive gear in at this point. We're not going to wait till we put the engine together. We're going to put the distributor drive gear in now when we have the engine in this state. It's much easier. This is a camshaft. This particular one's been reground. Volkswagen billet or stick. Very, very fine looking camshaft. It has a little number on it here. It says -1. Well, they have -1 through 7 and +1 through 7. Don't be too overly concerned about that, because I'll show you how to check for that. If you replace the cam and there was a -2 or 3 in there, or a +1 or 2, go down and ask for the same one if you can find it. If not, take what they have, and then I'll show you how to check for it. There's also the numbers on the inside here. There's a little dot. You can come in for this, Susie, and we can see it. I'll try to hold it a little bit closer if you can. Can you come a little closer, maybe? There we go. Little dot there, that's it. See that dot? Well, that dot there, now you can come back over here. Come on back out here. That dot goes in between 2 dots, which we can't show you on the camera. There's 2 dots on this little gear. You look on the teeth of this gear, and you'll find 2 little dots. The one dot here goes between the 2 dots there, like this. Just turn it, find your 1 dot, put it in between the gears of the 2 dots, drop it in place. The cam's in place. Okay? At this point, let's get down to the engine here, Susie. At this point, you want to turn the engine and turn the crankshaft with the rods just like this. Nice and smooth. Then reverse it. Reverse it. If when you're reversing the crankshaft like that, when you do that, if the camshaft lifts up out of the journals, chances are it's too tight. I'll show you another way to check that. Turn it until you get the dot between the 2 dots on the steel gear and bring it back up to place. And then at this point, take your hand and gently, if you can come down here a little bit closer, Susie, get right on this gear, you can gently rock this camshaft back and forth. When you rock it back and forth like this in place, if there's too much of a click, it's too loose. If you can't get any click at all, it's too tight. Also, the camshaft should have end play, that is back and forth. And when you go like this and listen and feel, you can feel that end play, and it's only 1/1000th or 2. So you look for the end play this way and rocking it back and forth like this. It's very important that it has just a little bit of play. Not a lot, just a little bit, and not too tight. Okay, the camshaft is now in place. At this point, I'm going to put the distributor drive gear in. Get your distributor, and after you put the distributor drive gear in, just stick the distributor in and lock it down, and that way it won't fall back out. I like to put it in now because if you ever put one of these in after you get the engine together and one of these little metal shims happens to fall off inside the engine, you have to take the whole thing apart again. It just doesn't work too well with those in the engines. At this point, we're going to have to determine where we're going to put this in, which way we're going to put it in. All right, let's see how I can show you this. You just put the camshaft in here with the dot on the camshaft between the 2 dots on the gear. When they're meshed together at this point, you back up here. And I don't know if the camera can show this, so I'll just describe it, but out here on the snout, there's a keyway for the pulley. The keyway at this time should be pointing straight down. If the keyway is pointing straight down and the big dot on the cam and the 2 little dots are just a little far apart like that, you can then put this distributor drive gear inside the hole here. Now, if you look at this, come in a little bit closer on this, Susie. This distributor drive gear, you notice that it's small on this side and large on this side. Well, it's offset. That means you can't put the distributor in wrong. It'll only go in one way. But you have to put this in the proper way so that you can have some relationship to the timing later on. So let's simplify this by just moving the engine a little bit like this. On bugs, not squarebacks or type 3s, but on bugs and buses, when you put this in, when everything else is the way I showed you, this small part should be on this side, and the angle should be just about right there. If you can get as close as you can on that, Susie, get right down as close as you possibly can, focus in. You see the hole here for the fuel pump, and you see the small side and the large side. Remember that spring, you can put that in later. That's a little shock absorber for the distributor. But that's about how it's going to look. Just about like that. See? Right like that. This is for bugs and buses. Squarebacks, you got a squareback? Opposite. Opposite. Maybe a little more like that, opposite. But for bugs and buses, which this engine we're going to build for is like this, okay? Now, in order to get this down in there, come on back a little bit, Susie. We're going to have to push this down inside, and it's going to have to mesh with the brass gear, which is the distributor drive gear. This brass gear right here. Now, how are we going to push that down inside? Well, this is a little tricky. And remember the tool we had earlier? I was talking about the bearing. Well, we're going to be using that again in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up the crankshaft. Now remember, that keyway, are we down here, Susie? That keyway is pointing straight down. So let's move it back a little bit. So truly that keyway is pointing straight down from the engine. At that point, this should be at that angle that I just showed you. At this point, just take your thumb and pop up the crankshaft, and the distributor drive gear should go right in place. Okay, everything's in fine shape right now. Everything is back in place where it should be. The camshaft is located properly. It seems to have the proper end play on it, and it seems to have the proper backlash. That's that rocking back and forth. So everything seems to be fine. The distributor drive gear is in properly. Don't have to worry about it now. Put your distributor in there, bolt it down so that the gear can't back out. You don't have to worry about that now. It's been put in properly. You can double check if you want to make sure that the big dot on the camshaft is between the two little dots on the steel drive gear. If you have a steel drive gear, by the way, with one little dot on it, don't worry, just match dot to dot. It'll be fine. Okay, now at this point, our little tool that we've been working with, we're not going to forget and just leave it there or set it aside and forget it. We're now going to place it over here on the other case half and put it in place. This is the cam plug. This is the thing that fits back here at the back. I don't know if you can see that, but if you look at the back end of the cam, you'll see a little cutout point, and you'll see this little thing that looks like a $50, and that's the cam plug. Okay, now at this point, we have a choice of a couple different sealants that I use. I use both of these equally as much. I'm going to use this one because it's a little more colorful for the camera. That's a little bit heavier than this. But a word about the sealant that you're going to use for this case. You don't need a heavy, great big, thick, gooey sealant. You just don't need it. We are dealing with machine case halves that are just absolutely beautiful. They're smooth, they fit together tight, absolutely gorgeous. When you take an engine apart from the factory, you can hardly see any sealant on it. They use like a lacquer, a very, very thin stuff. You don't need very much. All this thick yellow gooey glue and big thick stuff they put on here, absolute nonsense. You don't need it. What happens is it squeezes out on the inside and gums things up. Don't put a heavy sealant on it. Use a real light sealant, put it on properly, and just be done with it. Boy, they seal that one up tight. It's a good thing I'm going to use this one. This is something called high-tech, And it has a consistency. If you can come in here, Susie, it has a consistency of about, oh, I don't know, syrup, about like that. Okay? So, I'm now at this point going to just put a little bit on this cam plug on the bottom and stick the cam plug in the little trough that the cam plug has here on the bottom. No big deal, you don't need to see this, you'll be able to find it, and it just goes on there. And now I'm just going to goop the sealant onto the case all the way around, being very careful, because I'm tilting the case here. Doggone it, be very careful. I'm glad I did it so I can point it out to you. Make sure it doesn't get on the bearings or on the camshaft or anything like that. Normally you wouldn't be doing it with the engine tilted the way I'm tilting it here so you can see it. Just try not to get any of it on the bearings or on any of the journals. And we're just going to go around the case and do this. After you've done this half, proceed to do this half over here. All we have to do now is straighten everything out, bring the rods into an upright position, push them sideways a little bit like this so they don't fall down, and we're going to take this, we're going to drop it on there. But you say, well gee, maybe the cam followers are going to fall out when we do that. That's right, they might. There's a little spring tool that I have here somewhere. Yeah, here they are. You may not have these. If you have problems with the cam followers falling out when you put the other half on, take a little heavier white grease or some of that S that we talked about earlier and stick them in there. It'll stick them in place long enough for you to pop the case over the top of it. But otherwise, take a look at these. These are available from all the different places, the different mail order houses that you see in the magazines, and neat little tools because they're like spring tools, like that, and they just spring in place back here and hold the cam followers in, like that, and they won't fall out. Of course, you might drop them on the floor, but the cam follower won't fall out. We've got our case, hold the case like that, kind of look through one of the holes there where the stud goes through and kind of just come over it like a bomber like that, zero in, and slide it right down into place. Okay, now we've got the case half on, the two case halves are together basically. We're just going to put our 6 case nuts, the big 6 case nuts, on here. They're sealing nuts, the ones I'm using right here. You don't have to use those. You can use the ones that you had, or a nut and a washer. To use sealing nuts, they say you don't use the washer, but I've known people who have, and there's no real reason to use sealing nuts for sealing purposes. It's just I suppose they fit on and they won't vibrate loose. And they don't vibrate loose anyway, but it's kind of a thing we've just used. You don't have to feel like you have to go out and get sealing nuts because the case isn't going to leak there unless the case is warped. If the case is warped, we shouldn't be putting it together. Okay, we're going to just very lightly. We're not going to torque these down yet. We're not going to torque them down. We're just going to very lightly kind of squish the case together at this point. Just put it together. Not torquing anything because we're not going to torque these yet. The people who made this car, Volkswagen, suggest that you put the 2 8mm nuts here first and torque those down to 14 pounds. Do that first and then torque down the other 6 bolts. By the way, the socket size on 8mm nuts, 13 millimeters. The socket size is 13 millimeters. The nut is 8mm inside diameter. These big sealing nuts are 12 millimeter. The socket was a 19 millimeter, and I believe most of the other ones are 17 millimeter. You only have to have a 10 millimeter wrench, a 13 millimeter wrench, 17 and 19, and that's all you should really need. You shouldn't need many more than those right there. Okay, I'm going to torque these two cam locating nuts first. I'm going to torque them to 14 pounds. Okay, after I've torqued these two to 14 pounds, then I'm going to take my socket, if I can find where I put it, my 19 millimeter socket, and I'm going to tighten down to 22 foot-pounds the sealing nuts. Now some people say sealing nuts should only go to 18 foot-pounds, and the other one should go 22 to 25. So I think I'll stay with what's recommended and go that route. All right, so very careful on the torque. Should be right about there, and we're going to tighten down the 6 main nuts now, case nuts. Remember, torque the 2 cam locating nuts in the corner there first. After you've tightened on just a little bit, locate the case together, and then torque these down. And then it's a matter of buttoning up the case, putting 8 millimeter nuts all the way around it, and finishing it off. At this very point, you should be able to get this, Susie. You hear that? See how easy that engine moves? See how easy that's going back and forth? And you see when I take my hand on both sides, how easy it slaps back and forth? That's how loose the engine should be. That's how it is, loose as a goose. It should turn over, spin very freely. You should be able to take your hand on both sides and go like that before you set end play. Another bad thing about these things is that you have to go through a lot of lighters or matches or a lot of lighter fluid because they keep going out and you keep lighting them. Let's talk about end play. Put this aside. End play spooks an awful lot of people. Seems awful complicated to some folks. Let's try to simplify this, all right? End play, nothing more than that back and forth motion, that's end play. What we want to do is reduce that end play down to about 5 thousandths. The factory says 4 to 6 thousandths, so we're going to try to average it out to 5 thousandths. And all we do to do this, to make it as simple as possible, I'll show you the way I do it. We put the flywheel on the end of the crankshaft. We tighten the gland nut. That's the big nut that holds it down, that gets torqued to a whole bunch. The book says, I believe, 218, 220 pounds. Actually, I tighten them to more like 300 pounds, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, we tighten the gland nut down, and we take a dial indicator. This is without any shims in it or any seals or anything. We just put the flywheel bare on the crankshaft, and we take the total amount of end play. I'm going to deal in thousandths here. We just measure it, and the total amount of end play that I have now without any shims in it is 35 thousandths. That's how much end play I have right now. Okay? We want 5 thousandths left over. We find shims that are worth 30 thousandths. If we put 30 thousandths worth of shims in here, and we had 35 thousandths to begin with, we're going to have 5 thousandths left over. And that's the end play we want. That's basically as simple as it is right there. And to find the shims that you need, just go to the dealer or go somewhere that has end play shims and ask for an assortment. Ask for, 2 of each ought to be fine.
then there's 4 or 5 different sizes. 2 of each shims, and there's the small ones, the large ones. And use different combinations until you get to the 5/1000ths that you need. There's also a very simple little gadget. I make them and lend them to people, and even have sold a few of them. I'll walk out and get it and show it to you, and you might be able to rig this up at home. Susie, if you can come in a little bit close on this, I'll try to hold this in such a way that people can see it. This is a bolt with a couple of nuts on it and a big washer that I've stuck to. Can you see that pretty well? Okay. I'm going to put this on the engine over here. So what we do, you might rig something like this up at home with a feeler gauge. You don't necessarily have to have a dial indicator. You could use a feeler gauge to do all this stuff with too. All you do is you put the bolt and nut through the case like this, and tighten it down from the back, the 2 nuts, tighten them together with a thing on there, and you bring this out, and then you push it in, and you run your feeler gauge in there, and you measure it and see how much it was, tight to like that. And then when you figure out your shims, you just keep doing this back and forth until you can get only a 5/1000ths feeler gauge in there, and you're going to be pretty darn close. Also, remember when you were checking the backlash on the camshaft, you kind of got a feel for what things were. Well, that backlash wasn't near 5/1000, so the 5/1000ths that you're going to feel is going to be like a crick back and forth. There's going to be enough there. It's not going to feel tight. And you got to have a little end play so that you have proper oiling in there. And you'll be able to feel, if you play around with it for a little bit, that it seems to be a little bit too tight or too loose. 5/1000ths is what we're aiming for. Okay, we're going to take the gland nut off. You notice I can torque that on the 220 pounds with my hand. I can take it off too. See? I'm going to take the flywheel off. This is a 6-volt long neck flywheel, and this is a 200 millimeter 12-volt teeth long neck flywheel. Can you see that, Susie? You got it? Okay. Inside this flywheel goes this O-ring back here. It just squeezes right on the inside. Okay. The seal, if our torque wrench here is not in the way, our seal, of course, fits in the case here. You can see that. We have a seal installer, which I'll show you. Like that. That bolts into the crankshaft. This plate goes over that like that, and you tighten this down on there, and it squeezes the seal in place. You can also use a rubber mallet, and if you use some care and don't bang or beat this thing up too badly and get it in straight, you ought to be able to work that out. That is lacking a seal installer. Okay, the flywheel back here again has that O-ring in it. Now, if this were a 6-volt flywheel, remember our short neck, then we would use either a paper gasket over here at the end of the crankshaft, or we would use a metal gasket, depending on how smooth it is and conditions and what you would prefer. Okay, now let's say we've figured out what the end play is going to be, and you're happy with it. It measures out fine. Our next problem is, how are we going to tighten this thing on the engine case at that high torque that we have to have on there? Well, very simply, I'll show you what we've done. Let me put this flywheel on the engine again. Let's make believe the shims are in there, the seal's in there, we're ready to seal it up, and we take our gland nut, a 36 millimeter socket. This is a 36 millimeter socket, also handy on some of the rear wheels of some of the earlier cars and buses. Or not buses, but earlier cars. 36 millimeter socket is what we're going to need to tighten this gland nut down. What I've made here is I've taken a plate. Suppose you could get a piece of wood, but it wouldn't last too long, but I've taken just a plain old plate, bolted it to the table, and I drilled 2 holes in the plate that correspond with these 2 studs right here on the end of the case. And all I do is I take my case and I put it through the two holes right here. Can you see that, Susie? Can you come down here to this?
Yeah, I did it already.
Can you? Okay. And then we just take some washers and some nuts and we bolt the case to the plate. And find another nut in here and washer. And we bolt the case down. We don't bolt it too tight because you're going to put pressure on the flywheel and you can break the Glen nut that way. Just bolt it down. Then you take your flywheel lock. Now you should be able to secure a flywheel lock from a mail order house or a parts store. This one happens to be a 6 and 12 volt. The bottom here are the 6 volt holding teeth, and the top is the 12 volt. So it's a dual tool for the early and for the late, and they're not very expensive. I believe $7, $8, something like that. And you just put it through the hole in the case up here on top. I'll put it on this side so you can see it better. And it meshes. If you can come in real close, Susie, on this, it just locks itself in the teeth, and then you just bolt it down like that. Now you've got the case secure on the table. You've got the flywheel locked. It's not going anywhere. Get yourself a 36 millimeter socket and a breaker bar that's at least 3 feet long, and torque it down. We use, of course, here we use a kind of an expensive torque wrench with a memory dial gauge on it. So when we torque this down, we can torque this down and get it exactly tight enough for us to know that it was put on properly. If you use a 3 foot, and this is about 3 feet right here, right where my hand is. If you use a 3 foot breaker bar, remember that if you put 100 pounds of pressure out here at 3 feet, it is 300 pounds in here. So you ought to be able to estimate that. The Glen nut will break at about 450 to 500 pounds. So if you break a Glen nut, you know you've gone way, way too tight. If you use the breaker bar, 3 foot long at least, and the socket, and get it just good and tight so that you feel that it's tight, you should be okay. The factory states that if you have a new crankshaft and a new Glen nut, 220 foot-pounds is proper. Well, very seldom do you have the opportunity to use new Glen nut and new crankshaft. Very often you're using the old Glen nut over again and the old crankshaft, and so you must increase the torque a little bit because the threads are not exactly new like they were originally. So that's end play and torquing the flywheel down, and I hope this little fixture that we've cooked up here you might be able to modify very simply at home and be able to use it. Okay, I'm going to take this apart. We're going to go back over to the engine stand, and we're going to put the pistons and liners on in the heads. Okay, end play is completed. And now I want to put on the oil pump and talk to you a little bit about pressure relief valves, all right? The oil pump, we're going to use a new one. You can check your old oil pump just by really basically looking at it. You can use feeler gauges and other things, but when in doubt, replace this thing. It's not very expensive, and you can get a new one and put it in and feel pretty good. Basically, if you'll come in a little bit closer on the pump itself right here, a little bit closer than that even. Come right on into it, Susie. There you go. You can put a feeler gauge between the gears there and see if it's worn too much. Wear limit is like 3 thousandths, but when in doubt, replace this pump. And we happen to use this pump cover. You can reuse your old pump cover if you turn it. And while I've got the pump in close like this and we're looking at it, let me reach over here and get the pump gaskets and explain these. There's two pump gaskets that are used. The thicker one and then this real paper thin one here. The thicker one, of course, goes between the case and the pump itself, and the thin one up here goes between the pump cover and the pump body. Okay, this one right here, the one on the back, you use gasket material again. The gasket cinch or the high-tack or something not too heavy. You use gasket material back there. On this particular gasket, you shouldn't use any gasket material at all, and just sandwich those together like that. Now, the only other thing to do and to remember about oil pumps is that this part right here on the back of the oil pump, you can come in again close on this Susie. This right here is driven by the camshaft down inside the case. This right here slot fits inside the camshaft. Make sure that it does fit in there, and that when you turn the engine, that these gears are turning around and being turned by the camshaft. Also, when you put the pump in the engine, do not put the pump in dry. Squirt a little bit of assembly lube in there, or some oil or something. Make sure that there's a bit of lubrication in here, because otherwise you'd have a dry startup. You want to put a little bit of oil or some lubrication in here to create some suction, so you can begin the pumping process. Remember that on oil pumps. Now, pressure relief valves, the little ingenious thing that the factory developed on these cases that helps relieve pressure and distributes oil to the cooler and to the bearings at the same time, and bypasses, and it's a little complicated, but a number of years ago I put one of these cases on the mill and I cut the entire side off. I don't have that case anymore that showed how this thing works. Basically, this fits here on the bottom, and there's a spring inside there. This is the old one that came out of here, and the spring. On the newer cases, there's one on this side over here also, a much shorter one. But when you replace these, you can get these little kits. This is a stronger spring, and this plunger right here, if you come in real close, Susie, we can compare the old plunger that came out with the new one, okay? This is the old one right here, and this is the new one. Now, you notice the new one has a groove around the top there, right around there. It's cut out. Okay, they call this a pressure boost kit, oil pressure boost kit. And all it does is it sends oil to the bearings and the cooler at the same time, and keeps the pressure up, and makes it run a little bit cooler. So we recommend that you put a new one in. Come on back down here again, because a lot of people ask me which way does this go in, and this is very important. Come in as close as you can on this. This goes down like this, if you can see. Can you see that? Goes down like that, inside the case, that way, and then the spring goes on top. So we have this affair. It goes this way. You see that? Okay, goes in there, and after that's placed in there, you then put the washer on the nut, on the bolt that holds this in. It's a little tight, and you might have a little problem. Get a bigger screwdriver and tighten this thing in here, and we should be able to get it just like this. When you take the case apart, take the old one out. Sometimes they're very difficult to get out because they get hung up in there, and you should get it out so you can clean that area out very well. And if you have problems getting those out, there are pullers, all kinds of elaborate tapping things and stuff that you can use to get those things out. But that's the pressure relief valve, and replace it with a high volume valve. Put a new gasket on, tighten it up. Okay, we've got oil pumps, we've got our end play, we've got the pressure relief valve, we've torqued the case down, we've got the proper end play, and I want you to notice, if you'll come down on the engine now, Susie, when I spin this motor, I want you to notice how easy it spins. You see that? If your motor doesn't spin at least that easy, or somewhere near that easy, there's something wrong. Something is tight. The motor must be nice and loose at this point. Okay, pistons and liners. This is a liner. This is the thing the piston goes up and down in. And it's honed out very nicely, and it's nice and clean. It's brand new. We use new ones. This is the piston. Okay. This is an 85 .46 or 85.5 millimeter piston. This is the new piston pin, which goes through, if you'll come down here on the engine, it goes through the connecting rod. And over here are the two piston clips that go on each end here. Now, I've explained what these are. I'm just going to go ahead and put one on for you, and you can watch it. One of the things to remember on each one of these pistons, and you have 4 of them, is that when you look on top, there's a little arrow on each one of these pistons. If you don't find the arrow on top, come on in here a little real close on this piston, Susie, for just a minute or so. You see this little tab right here? Well, that tab is also on the side where the little arrow is. You can't see the arrow too well with the camera, but there's a little arrow. Now, every piston has that in Volkswagen. That little arrow always points toward the flywheel. All the arrows on the pistons point to the flywheel. Just like, remember the notches on the rods? They all were up. The arrows on the pistons point to the flywheels. Okay, what we do is we put a clip, a piston pin clip, on each side of the piston. Make sure it's in there. You might use the pliers. And the arrow is going to point toward the flywheel, so the piston goes on this way. Okay? It's very helpful if you put the clip in on the side that you're going, the opposite side to which way you're going to be pointing the pin in to. Make sure those clips are in, because if one of those clips comes loose, do quite a bit of damage. Earlier we talked a lot about assembly lube, putting the engine together with the bearings. Well, this is one time when we're not going to use assembly lube. Do not use assembly lube on piston rings and piston liners. If you do, the thing will smoke for a long time and the rings will take a lot longer to break in. So no assembly lube at this time. This is the time for plain old oil, okay? Put a little bit of oil, come on down here on the engine, put a little bit of oil inside the rod, a little bit of oil in here where the pin goes, and with a new pin and a little bit of oil on it and a new piston, the pin should just slide in and out very, very easily. You might remember when you took your engine apart how difficult it was for you to get the pin out. Well, originally it wasn't. Originally it went in and out just about like that, very easily. So with remembering the arrow pointing to the flywheel, it's now time to just install the pin inside the rod. Remember, you put the pin clip in on the other side of this piston already, and you should be able to just slide this right in. You might need to use a little bit of help with some of them, but generally not. And then the other piston pin clip goes in just that easy. And with a little pliers or something, make sure that the pin clip turns inside the piston. Make sure it turns inside the groove. You'll see a groove in there. Now, before you put the liner on, I'm going to tilt the engine down this way so you can look at this piston again and look at the rings here. When you put the rings on, you have three rings on this particular piston. This is the oil ring, this is the scraper ring, and this is the compression ring. The top one's compression, the second one's scraper, and the third oil ring down here is an oil ring. This is the one that distributes oil. Okay? The proper way to place these is you put the oil ring up and put the other ones about that equal distance apart. Try not to put them over the pin, don't put them down. But keep them separate. Put the oil ring in the center, this one over here, and the scraper ring over there. And that should be about the proper placement for the rings there. Okay, the liner, we put our little paper gasket on there that meets up against the case here. And we use just some plain old oil. We just put a little bit of oil inside each liner and work it around. No assembly lube, oil. And we put just a little bit of our gasket cinch or high tack around on the paper gasket like that. Now it's time for me to come over here and get my ring compressor. All kinds of ring compressors available. This is the one we happen to use. It's readily available in most stores. There's other things you can use also, but this is the one we use. All right, now what we do is we put lots of oil, plain old motor oil, on the rings there, and a little bit back on the piston. We've already put some oil on the liner, so we have motor oil on the liner and on the piston. At this point, you'll come down and come in real close on this, Susie. We take the ring compressor and we put it around the rings like this, and making sure they're in place, we clamp it down tight like that, and that holds the rings squeezed into the piston. At this point, it's very, very simple for you to put the liner in here. I hope you can see this with the camera. You'll get to it when you work on yours, and you just meet the piston just inside the liner, and you can use a rubber mallet or something soft, or I use my hand very carefully and just bounce it back until the rings go inside the piston. At that point, you can release your ring compressor and take it out of there, because you won't need it anymore for this particular piston. And at this point, you should be able to just come on down and look at this. Just slide it into the case. And you just go around and do all four like that. Next one we'll do, that was piston number 4, by the way. Now we're going to be working on number 3 next. Okay, we have piston number 3 and 4 installed now. And now I want to talk to you about something that's called deck height. Deck height is the difference between the top of the piston and the top of the liner. Now, Susie, if you'll come in real close on this piston right here, right down to my finger, you'll see that this is the piston right here, and this is the liner, the thing that it goes up and down in, okay? The difference in height between here and here should be, 40 to 70 thousandths. Without measuring it and having all kinds of elaborate measuring devices, go borrow a dime from somebody. This is a dime, 10-cent piece, and lay it in there, lay it up to the edge, and run your finger over it. If the dime is above the edge of the liner, then you don't have enough deck height. Okay? It's below the deck right here. Now, a dime happens to be about 50 thousandths thick, and this was sitting a little bit below that. Now, what if the piston is up too high? Well, they make all kinds of sizes of steel shims that you can put under the liner base down here. Show it down here, Susie. You would use the shims to go underneath the liner. They come in 10 thousandths, they come in 20 thousandths, and different sizes like that. So you'd want to shim the barrel up, the liner up, so that you had the proper deck height. Before we put the push rods in, at this point, it's very important that you dig up these little pieces of tin that were underneath here. These are very important to remember. You must put these pieces of shrouding back on underneath the pistons and liners on both sides. Very important that you put these back. What happens is the air from the fan up above blows down directly between the two pistons down here in the center, and this right here acts as a deflector to deflect some of the air back around the pistons and cylinders. If you don't put these on, the engine's going to run very hot, and you might do damage to the engine. And these snap right like that onto the studs that you had. Right there, they just snap in place, and it fits in there like that. Very important to remember those. Don't forget those. In fact, don't forget any of the shrouding that you had when you took the engine apart. Remember, air-cooled engine, and if you leave any of the shrouding out, or if you don't replace the sealing, if you don't separate the top of the engine from the bottom of the engine in the car, the top of the engine must draw cool air in, blow over the hot engine, and the hot air must expel out and away. if there's any way for that big fan in the engine to suck in the hot air from the bottom of the engine, you're going to be trying to cool a very hot air-cooled engine with hot air, and it doesn't work. So put all the shrouding back on. Don't leave things out, and your engine will last a lot longer. Okay, now we have the pushrod tubes. Let me just reach over here and grab about 4 of these, and the seals that we put on there. The seals, of course, come on in here, Susie, and look real close. The seal, a little white thing like this, and it just simply slides over with the taper end like that on there. And you put one of these seals on both sides of all 8 pushrod tubes. We're to the point now where we're going to put the pushrod tubes and the pushrods and the head on. We're up to this point. A nice little trick I'm going to show you, because a lot of people have problems fumbling with these and dropping on the floor. I'll show you how to put these in by using the pushrods. What we want to do is, we're ready now. We've checked deck height, we've got the pistons, barrels in, we've got our shroud on, and the head's ready to go. Okay, so at this point it's just a matter of placing the head on the studs and getting it sliding down, and slide it down to about that far. In other words, the pushrod tube which goes under here, about to the point where it wouldn't hold in place and where it would fall out. All right, put each pushrod tube in like that, and then drop pushrod down each one. And these will hold in place this way, and they won't fall all over the place. This will save you a lot of grief and washing these things off. If you wish to use sealer on the ends here, if you wish to use sealer, come in a little closer, Susie. If you wish to use sealer here for both sides of the head and the case, that's fine with me. Generally, if everything's clean and put together properly, it won't leak, but that's purely up to you. Now at this point, all we have to do is just kind of shuffle these pushrod tubes and pushrods around and kind of jiggle the head down till it's seated. At this point, it's a good idea if you can, by hand, turn these pushrods just a few turns like this, so that they make sure that they seat themselves into the aluminum. Just turn them around a couple of times, look at them from inside here, make sure that they're nice and square and straight. Did you get all that? Okay. All right, we're ready now to torque the head down. Okay, we have our 8 washers, head washers and nuts. We're going to slip those over the studs, the washers first. And the head nuts, which are usually 15 millimeter, by the way. That would be the size of the socket. The head stud is 10 millimeter. We talked about that earlier. Remember, we had 2 sizes of head studs. We had 8 millimeter and 10 millimeter. Remember the torques for both? Susie remembers. The torque on these 10 millimeter studs, 23, 25 foot-pounds. The torque on the 8 millimeter head studs was, that's right, you guessed it. You remembered it. Thank you. Did you say 18 foot-pounds? That's right. Okay, we just put these on hand tight. Look at those pushrod tubes down there, Susie. Look on each end. You see the top there? They're kind of coming real close on this right here. Looks like a little tiny spring. Well, when we torque this down, those pushrod tubes are going to compress and seal up even tighter. Okay, let's get the torque wrench now, and I'm going to show you the proper torquing sequence on this. I might mention here that a lot of engine builders, and it's valid, suggest that you put the pistons and liners on both sides and do them equally at the same time. That's a pretty good practice to do. There are other folks who would say it's not too important, but pretty reputable people have said this, and I respect that. So what you do is put the 1 and 2 side on, and then you tighten these down slightly and the other side, and then work them both together, tightening them up. You can do that if you wish to. We're going to torque this down with our clicker torque wrench to 23 foot-pounds. That's what I'm going to use. Okay? We start in the middle, and we're going to make X. We're going to make X patterns on our torquing. I don't really set the torque wrench a couple of different times. I just tighten it down till it doesn't really torque, and I just do the same thing. I'll do this one first, this one. I go this way, then the big one, and then here and there. I make two X's, small X's and big X's, and that's in the torquing sequence. Okay, tightening that. I'm not torquing these on yet. I'm just tightening them down so that it's nice and even. I do this one over here, and then I come over to this one. Number 3 top stud. Remember, that's the one we deep sunk. We deep sunk it so that the case wouldn't or shouldn't crack. Okay. Okay, now they're all fairly tight. Now we're going to go back to where we started from, and we're going to take it a little bit tighter, and then make our X a little bit tighter, and a little bit tighter, again, and then keep going this way, and over here, 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 and now at this point, I'll go for torque. Here, the clicker. If you're using the other type torque wrench, the beam wrench, just bring it up to, the beam would read fairly easy at 25 pounds. Much easier than 23, depending on how good a beam torque wrench you have. At this point, I'm going for the final torque. Again, torquing in an Xing pattern. Okay? Do it again. Check it out. You'll notice that it loosened up just a little bit, or it squished in. Check it over. If you want to, come back and check it over later again before you finalize everything. For a number of years, we used a little bit of a Loctite on some of these, but the factory doesn't do that, doesn't recommend it. You can do it if you'd like to. Torque is more important. Proper torque will keep the head from loosening up. So that's about it right there. Let's put the rocker arm on, and a few words about that. Let me go get a rocker arm. What I'd like to mention here is, if you'll come in here, Susie, right to this right here. Right to my finger there. You see these adjusters? There's 4 adjusters on here, and they should be nice and smooth and round. When you put your head back together, the tops of the valves are nice and flat, and these adjusters, if they're worn at all, secure a new set of adjusters. Put those on. Do the heads a favor by putting those on. Okay? At this point, we just slide the rocker arm over that and fit each one of the push rods into the cups of the rocker arm. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then a couple of washers and a couple of 8mm nuts here. The torque on this is, I believe, 18 foot-pounds, which is a little more than hand tight. Hand tight, by the way, is 14 foot-pounds. So you can really judge this. Use your torque wrench if you wish to, or just put these on and tighten them up extra tight with your hand. With this size wrench, don't use a great big wrench. What we're trying to say is that this doesn't have to be all that tight. Also, the clutch bolts, when you put clutch bolts on out here, they're also 18 foot-pounds. So we're going to tighten these down. That should do it. Along with the tape, I've sent you a sheet of paper that said VW valve adjusting made simple. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, maybe I'll just show you a little bit here. I was telling you that you can adjust all these valves with just 2 turns of the engine instead of working with the distributor. Basically, you can set these 3 right here. You can come a little closer, Susie. You can set these 3, 1, 2, 3, and this one on the other side with 1 turn of the engine, and then you turn the engine completely once over, and you'll be able to adjust these 3 on the other side, and then this one on this side. The liner, the thing that it goes up and down.
I hope you've enjoyed the last 2 hours of how to rebuild your Volkswagen engine on video. I've enjoyed bringing it to you, and many people have commented to me over the years how much they've learned and gained from this particular videotape. Please mail back to me the registration form that was in the box that the videotape came in. This is how I keep my mailing list up to date, and I inform you of possible updates down the road, and also new tapes that I've done and that I'm going to do. We didn't go into a lot of blueprinting on this particular engine. What do I mean by blueprinting? That means the fine details of how to put this engine together. In our 2-volume set of how to hot rod your Volkswagen, we do a lot more than talking about how to hot rod your Volkswagen. We talk about blueprinting. We talk about things like rocker arm geometry, which we didn't have time to go into at the last part of this tape. So I'd like to encourage you to think about possibly purchasing How to Hot Rod Your Volkswagen Engine on video with Dick Nuss and Bill Duncan. Also, do you believe that rebuilding a Volkswagen transmission is easier than an engine? It is, if you know how. And we've just completed a 2-volume, again, set. It's 3 hours long, of how to rebuild a basic IRS and swing axle Volkswagen transmission. And with this videotape, you'll see how easy it is to do a transmission. Once again, thank you very much for buying this videotape. I'm Jerry Hahn, and why don't you tell your friends to buy a copy of this tape also? Thank you.
The cylinders. If you don't put these on, the engine's going to run very hot, and you might do damage to the engine. And these snap right like that onto the studs that you have. Right there, they just snap in place and it fits in there like that. Very important to remember those. Don't forget those. In fact, don't forget any of the shrouding that you had when you took the engine apart. Remember, air-cooled engine. And if you leave any of the shrouding